For the first time in this businesswoman's life, her morning didn't start with coffee. She shivered at the jarring sound of the alarm and opened her eyes. She definitely wasn't expecting to be greeted by a total hottie instead of sunshine. She jumped out of bed, realizing that this hottie was also her coworker. Her scream was so loud, it even managed to wake the guy up. Unlike her, he wasn't even a little bit embarrassed by the unusual situation. He gently hugged her and snuggled against her chest, which made her scream bloody murder. She was mortified by how casually he nuzzled her cleavage. She recoiled and demanded to know why she was undressed. Yeonjun smirked and explained how she'd been complaining about the heat, and then took her clothes off herself. He smirked and added that he even helped her get into her pajamas. Sun Hao definitely had a few too many that night after a brutal week at work. The booze hit her so hard, she practically tackled him onto the bed. Sun Hao was always so reserved, but now she was throwing all caution to the wind. Yeonjun was stunned by the woman's behavior, someone he never dreamed would give him the time of day. He gave a polite smile and warned her not to blame him later. To his surprise, she not only ignored him, but she also called him a dog. She smiled like she really did see an adorable little puppy. The woman laughed playfully and hugged him, calling him Fluffy. The next thing he knew, he felt her breath on him and asked what she was about to do. Hao just ignored his question again and laid a passionate kiss on him. The guy returned her affection with pleasure, something he'd been craving forever. He devoured the kiss, wishing it could last an eternity. She suddenly pulled away, then dove back in for another round of kisses. Hao wanted the ground to swallow her whole when she heard all that. Looks like Yeonjun was eating up how flustered she was getting. He kept teasing her about how into him she was. He didn't stop running his mouth until she smacked him with a pillow. She covered her face, mortified, trying to figure out how things got to this point. Just 2 months ago, they were signing a partnership agreement between their companies. Yeonjun was the CEO of Fidi Capital. Sun Hao was the CEO of Yongding Group, and she kept her distance. He playfully asked when they were finally gonna tie the knot. Sun Hao reminded him exactly what their responsibilities were. Even though she was serious, the CEO still couldn't wipe that grin off his face. She said she didn't get why he was so hung up on such trivial details. She reminded him he wasn't even at those negotiations and never even met her. He looked away, hinting that she still didn't get which of the conditions was the extra one. She got pissed and thought to herself that he was like a dog that never gives you a straight answer. Yeonjun reminded her that marriage was his main objective. He leaned in, hinting she'd have to earn his support. Sun Hao reminded him how screwed over Yunding was back then. She even said she'd marry a mutt to save the company. The guy looked away, all thoughtful, and called her statement intriguing. She started listing her flaws, saying she wasn't even into guys. He shot back that if she were perfect, she'd have a hard time accepting him. Yeonjun grinned, showing her he totally got it. He moved closer, saying he'd be calling her darling from now on. She got pissed when he demanded she call him my beloved husband. Each thing he said was more out there than the last. She smirked slyly and asked if he really wanted to marry her. He clammed up when she pressed him about having some kind of ulterior motive. Yeonjun stared down the woman, telling her she was nothing but a wolf in sheep's clothing. She felt nothing but contempt for that lying, scheming scumbag. In the Song family, there was a legend that their ancestor was a shaman. With each generation, the gift weakened, manifesting in different ways. Sometimes it was so ridiculous, it was more like a curse than a gift. Her ability was that if a man lied, he'd start looking like a dog. So, from childhood, Hao could see through every guy's BS. She rejected every declaration of love with disgust, knowing they were all full of it. Lucky for her, it only affected men when they were interacting with her. Even so, over time, this ability totally killed her interest in guys. Yeonjun had no clue about this, so he didn't get why she was so pissed. After a bit, she got back to her duties. She called Yonggi and ordered short positions to be opened in the market. All her orders were aimed at improving the client company's situation. Before her personal assistant could even hear the assignment, there was a knock at the door. Secretary Aileen announced that Chairman Wen had arrived. Wen Zhou was the chairman of the board of directors of Yunding Group. Hao said she was busy and told him to spit out what he needed, quick. The guy held out the cake and asked if he couldn't just visit for no reason. He gave her puppy dog eyes and said he just wanted to see her. She went to call her assistant, but he casually covered her mouth with his hand. Sun Hao froze in surprise when she saw his tender gaze. In his usual way, he begged her not to kick him out of her office. Wenzhou wiped away fake tears and asked if she agreed with him. The woman pushed his hand away and demanded he stop bothering her while she worked. He looked away, all sad, and asked if she thought he was a pest. Sun Hao asked how she could think of her little brother as annoying. She reminded him that he himself knows the current situation in the company. The dude saw his shot and asked her out to dinner that night. Hao told him she already had a meeting set up with Yan Jiang from Fidi Corp. Wen's face dropped when he heard that and told her to stay away from him. He glared at her, saying the guy was bad news. Wen slammed his fist on the table, saying he wouldn't let her get taken too. I guess it was the first time Sun Hao had ever seen him that pissed. She reminded him that his company was the one that helped them survive when things got rough. The guy almost started crying, asking what he was supposed to do if she got married. Hao smiled and said he's been able to handle things on his own for a while now. He suddenly got close and begged her to stay with him and not get married. Wen was practically glued to her, promising he'd always be there and never screw her over. She stroked her friend and said she was heading to that meeting to hammer out the details. The woman added that she wasn't planning on thinking about her love life anytime soon. Wen couldn't argue with that, but he still felt a pang of disappointment. That same evening, she went to a restaurant to meet with Yan Jun. He slammed his hand on the table and announced that he was already 24 years old. Hao just froze, holding her glass in surprise. She gave an awkward smile and wished him a happy birthday. He just got pissed in response, saying he needed to get married ASAP. He leaned over her aggressively, insisting this wasn't up for debate. He threatened to crush her company if she didn't meet his demands. Sun Hao lit into the guy, and everyone stopped to stare. She jumped up and called him a bonehead with floppy ears. He froze, totally thrown, wondering how she knew he was. Well, now he felt like prey cornered by a wild animal. Hao was surprised when he called her a true descendant of a shaman. She gave a nervous laugh, saying she had no idea what he was talking about. The guy adjusted his tie and said they both had secrets. He said he was ready to lay his cards on the table if she'd just trust him. She frowned, wondering if he'd been digging into her past. Yanjun leaned in close, saying they needed to be straight with each other. He got right up to her ear and asked who they were going home with tonight. It was so disgusting to her, she was shaking with rage. She told him to get lost and threw a plate right in his face. Little did she know, that very night he would turn into a total animal. Yanjun asked why she was so surprised. Being a shaman and all, Song Hao scrambled around the room, trying to get away from this monster. He immediately pounced on her and yanked her leg as hard as he could. The guy smirked and asked if she really thought he saved Yunding out of the goodness of his heart. He loomed over her, saying there had to be something left in her that made her different. Yanjun gripped her trembling shoulders, saying he'd already shared his secret. He stared right through her, demanding she spill hers. The whole thing was so terrifying, she just blacked out. And that's how Song Hao ended up under the same roof as a monster. She drifted into a light sleep, like she could finally escape. She figured he must not be scared of anything if he was showing his true colors. The guy smirked, saying her pulse was racing and her body was getting warmer. Looks like he knew she was faking being asleep. Hao shot up and demanded to know who he really was. He casually sat down next to her and explained that he was just a regular guy. Yanjun sighed, exhausted, and added that he wasn't exactly your average Joe. His mom was a descendant of some ancient family, shackled by a curse. This curse hit one descendant in every generation. Legend had it, they gained the ability to, transform into a dog. Sometimes that ability could get a little out of hand. Sun Hao got wary and asked if he was some kind of wolf thing. Yanjun waved off that idea, saying he was just your garden variety mutt. To break the curse, he needed to marry someone with shaman blood running through their veins. He casually mentioned that she was the one he'd been searching for his whole life. Sun Hao finally understood the real reason he needed this marriage. He agreed, saying that thanks to her, he could finally be free. Hao mentally cursed that scumbag for trying to use her. He called the marriage a formality and suggested they get divorced later. Hao grilled him with questions before seriously considering his request. She smiled and asked if he was hiding anything else. The guy awkwardly looked away and said he had no more secrets. Her disappointment was off the charts when he suddenly turned into a dog. She called him out on his lie and threatened to turn him into a chihuahua. Yanjun tried to weasel his way out of it, saying it wasn't really a secret. He leaned in close and said they had to fall in love to break the curse. The guy leaned in, real close to her lips, and asked if she'd think about it. Hao pushed his face away, saying that was going way too far. She gave him a dark look, suggesting he could just stay like that forever. The woman stated she could support him as thanks for his help. He begged her to believe he didn't save Yundin just to take advantage of her. The guy pleaded with her, tears in his eyes, to give him a chance and live together for a while. He changed back into a dog the second he promised he wouldn't push things if she said no. Hao called him out for still lying through his teeth. The guy smirked and said he was just doing it for their happiness. She decided to test something and asked him to show her how he transforms. He jumped at the chance to do what she wanted and transformed into a dog. Somehow, Hao started thoughtfully checking out the Doberman. She said he was just as good-looking as he was in his human form. The woman stroked him menacingly and promised she'd get even with him for everything. He sensed a trap when she said they'd be tying the knot tomorrow. The next day, they headed to a photo studio to get their wedding picture taken. Even the photographer noticed how far apart they were sitting. Hao told herself to endure it all for the sake of breaking the curse. In the end, they somehow got a weird picture of them together. That same day, they were officially declared husband and wife. The tension was ratcheting up higher and higher with every passing hour. Hao thought their marriage was supposed to break the curse. She was shaking with fury when he changed back into a dog the second she got home. She grabbed his snout and told him he was taking her for a fool. Hao stared daggers at him, a look that could kill. She was floored that she hadn't even dated before, and now she was already married. Yanjun transformed back and said he had deep feelings for her. He figured maybe it didn't work because she just didn't care. The guy still couldn't figure out how her lie detector worked. Hao laughed and asked him what deep feelings he was even talking about. He suddenly went quiet and said he'd noticed her a long time ago, which she didn't know. He asked if she remembered a press conference from 5 years back. She was on stage then, wearing a black dress and a white flower in her hair. Sun Hao immediately started thinking, trying to dig that memory up. She remembered it was after the accident with her dad and Uncle Wen. That was the toughest time in her life, made her hands shake like crazy. Yanjun recalled how incredibly determined her gaze remained. Back then, she said that as long as she was around, Yongding wouldn't fall. The dark circles under her eyes showed her pain, but her spirit was pure steel. Her fragility and resilience completely captivated young Yanjun's heart. Looking at her, he felt his heart pounding in his chest. Hao blushed, realizing he'd been there that day too. The man touched her hand and said she was all he'd thought about since then. She was shocked that he was being straight with her and not just trying to pull a fast one. Hao tried to regain her composure and decided she needed to test him. She told him his sweet talk didn't erase the last 5 years. Looks like just one sentence from her was enough to bring him crashing back to reality. He remembered being 19, making plans for the future. Yanjun habitually got into the waiting car, but the ride was short-lived. Another truck came barreling towards him at full speed. After that incident, he was laid up in the hospital for a few years. He noticed the woman's worry and told her he was fine now. He suggested she check for herself and flexed his bicep. Before her eyes were powerful arms with well-defined muscles. The veins visible under his skin made her want to reach out and touch. Looks like Yanjun definitely wasn't expecting that to be a turn-on. The woman gently ran her nails across the man's muscular arm. For a moment, it seemed to her that those arms possessed incredible strength. She recoiled instantly, trying to figure out what was happening to her. Hao froze, trying to analyze the sensations on her fingertips. The guy saw his chance and suggested she get a feel for him in other places too. She immediately recoiled and said she wasn't into it at all. Yanjun stroked her cheek and said he wanted to spend every day with his bride-to-be. He looked her in the eyes and said these past 5 years had been a total waste. His words were so smooth, her face just wouldn't stop burning up. She decided to put some distance between them, saying she was just a means to break the curse. The woman reminded herself to stay on her guard. She held out her passport and said she didn't have the power he needed. In her usual way, she added that he should try someone else. He smirked and said that now they were in this together, for better or worse. Yeonjun made it clear she wasn't just walking away with a marriage certificate. And that's how their weird life together kicked off. Every morning now started with her sharing her space with someone else. On one of those mornings, she just strolled past him, acting like he wasn't there. The messy-haired woman shuffled into the bathroom in just her nightgown. She brushed her teeth, thinking she looked like a total mess. Her unusual hubby decided to brighten her morning and walked right into the bathroom. She froze, totally surprised when he offered her a towel. How completely spaced that she was living with a beast now. She casually spat on the beast, forgetting it was Yeonjun. It wasn't until a minute later that she remembered she was talking to Mr. Yan now. She'd almost forgotten he'd even moved in with her. With everything that's been going on, that day, she couldn't shake the feeling he'd been planning this for ages. Somehow, How just couldn't accept that she was stuck in this contract. She kept trying to get it through his head that she wasn't the right woman for him. She suggested they give it a month to figure things out. Yangin wouldn't budge and insisted on a year. How wasn't backing down and pushed for 3 months. She threatened that if he didn't agree, she'd file for divorce. Yeonjun sighed, defeated. Realizing he wasn't going to win this one, he was left with no choice but to agree to her terms. He gave her an innocent smile and insisted that he needed to live here. The guy was right when he said they didn't have time to develop a relationship. He saw her hesitation and said he'd go pack his things right away. Somehow, How stopped him and suggested they lay down some ground rules. Ultimately, they still ended up where they are now. The woman awkwardly wiped him down, hoping he wouldn't get upset. She suddenly wondered why he was in dog form. He couldn't give her a real answer, so he just barked. She remembered that because of the curse, he lives as a dog for a few days every month. She was blown away by how fast his words became reality. Yeonjun was speechless, just nodding his head. How froze when she realized he was staring at something and then looked away. She glanced down and realized he was totally checking out her chest. The very thought of it made her burn with anger and rage. She shoved him off the couch, demanding to know what he was looking at. How demanded he explain how he could even think he was being honorable. She gave him first aid while simultaneously chewing him out. The woman wounded his pride by saying he was too fragile. He was ready to tear into her just for a comment like that. His anger melted into embarrassment when she gently stroked him and asked where it hurt. She leaned in close to his nose, like she was about to kiss him. That tender move made his heart blaze and pound like crazy. Even though he was acting like a dog, his gentle, kind eyes gave him away. Somehow, How decided to snap him back to reality and reminded him of yesterday's conditions. First off, she laid down the law about keeping things strictly professional at work. She also wanted their marriage to stay completely under wraps. On top of that, she absolutely forbade him from making any advances. That night, he got all huffy and declared that he was the most honorable guy around. Because of this morning's little incident, she added that she could add new rules now. It all felt unfair, but he was out of options. Before heading to work, she offered to whip something up for him. The guy turned her down and walked her to the door. Just before she left, he gently, but insistently, tugged on her pants leg. She immediately knelt down and petted him, asking what was wrong. She was surprised when he nuzzled against her and wagged his tail. She enjoyed the affection, so she rubbed her face against his muzzle too. She loved the feelings she got when she was close to him. She was amazed at how soft the Doberman's fur was. Somehow How couldn't help but imagine what his real body might be like. All these thoughts made her realize for the first time just how unfulfilled she was. Before heading out, she did a quick mental checklist to make sure she wasn't forgetting anything. The second she got to work, she jumped right into her responsibilities. She was unusually sharp, barking out orders left and right. Lunchtime was getting close. She could feel it in her bones. Wen greeted her with his usual smile and a cake in his hands. He'd even made coffee, so she could really treat herself. The woman started digging in and told him his timing was perfect. She didn't mention she hadn't even had her morning coffee thanks to her dog. Wen smiled gently, like he was genuinely happy that he'd made her day. He told her to eat up while he poured her a drink. She immediately noticed when he accidentally spilled the coffee. How freaked out, trying to wipe up the coffee as fast as she could. She froze when he suggested calling the cleaning lady. That sentence seemed to jog something loose in her memory. Her head felt like it was about to explode when she remembered her housekeeper. She bolted out of the building and headed home as fast as she could. A confused Wen tried to figure out what was going on with her. Meanwhile, the housekeeper was just arriving at the woman's house. Sun Hao Hao knew what time she was due and jumped in her car. The Doberman, totally clueless, cranked the volume all the way up. Meanwhile, the woman was just arriving at the apartment complex entrance. Hao Hao was trying to hurry, but kept hitting every red light. The second that light turned green, she floored it. Yanjun casually drew himself a hot bath and grabbed the champagne. Hao Hao pulled up just as the housekeeper was punching in the code. The security guard greeted her with a smile, but she bolted for the elevator. She threw open the front door and heard a woman scream. The woman burst into the bathroom and found the Doberman taking a bath. He immediately tried to cover himself up when he saw the shocked faces. The housekeeper found out for the first time that Hao Hao got a dog. The next second, she was screaming bloody murder about how the dog was possessed by some evil spirit. Eventually, she cleaned up and left, leaving them alone. She grabbed a hairdryer and offered to dry him off so he wouldn't catch a cold. She was amazed at how quickly and evenly his fur dried. Yanjun shyly turned his head away from her petting. Hao Hao saw his hurt look and realized she needed to pet him too. She stroked him behind the ear and apologized for scaring him. Her words sounded so unusual to him that his eyes lit up. It seems like just one cute look from him was enough to make her heart race. She couldn't help but burst with joy and hug the dog. It happened so fast, she didn't even realize what she was doing at first. She recoiled, remembering it wasn't just any dog, it was Yanjun. For 20 years, she'd met nothing but lying dudes. But with him, it felt different. She totally lost it and just wanted to pet him right away. Hao Hao whipped her head around, realizing her hand was already reaching for his head. She saw how much he loved her gentle touch. Only his happy whimpers made it harder for her to keep her distance. The woman reached for a cup and asked if he wanted some coffee. Then she remembered the caffeine and offered him something to eat instead. She felt super awkward when she realized there was no dog food in the house. Yanjun bolted to the room and then came back with this weird pendant. He put it on the table, and then a keyboard just popped up on it. Hao Hao watched the animal's actions, totally blown away. He was expertly typing a search query online with his paws. Just like that, he ordered 2 sets of top-shelf seafood. Then he crossed his paws all smug, which just made her freak out with excitement. She praised him, saying how smart he still was, even stuck in a dog's body. The woman happily ran to the intercom when she heard the buzzer. She definitely wasn't expecting her coworker to be standing at her door instead of the delivery guy. The second she heard his voice, she told him to come on in. Hao Hao rushed over to the dog and told him to be nice. The guy smiled as he walked into her place, saying he brought sweets. His face twisted with disgust when he saw the new dog. He didn't even know she had gotten a pet. He thought she hated dogs, but she said that wasn't the case. Looks like Wen's a little salty she didn't even tell him. She made up some excuse about her mom leaving the dog with her while she was away. He was surprised, because he remembered she didn't have a dog at New Year's. Hao tried to weasel her way out of it, saying she found him in the street. Wen's doubts were kicking into overdrive, especially since this Doberman looked like a purebred. Looks like even Yangjun was getting sick of his constant questions. She finally managed to fend off his barrage of questions, when kept glancing thoughtfully at the massive dog. Hao spilled her water when he asked if it was a boy or a girl. She immediately started blowing on her hand, which she'd just scalded with boiling water. Wen started to move, but the Doberman beat him to it. He instantly stood next to his owner and turned on the cold water. Now the dog seemed even weirder to their guest. He finally went over and asked if his little sister was all right. Hao forced a smile and said everything was fine. Wen gently took her hand and brought it to his lips, blowing on the wound. He smiled softly and reminded her how she taught him to breathe through pain. His gaze was so intense, she actually blushed. The second he did that, the Doberman smacked him with its paw. Wen pushed his paws away and asked why this mutt wasn't fixed yet. That comment just made the dog even angrier, and he started snarling. Hao whispered, telling him to chill out and leave the guy alone. She decided to get him away from there before he went after Xiaozhou Wen. Even as she dragged him away, he was still glaring at his rival. She put him down and squeezed his face, telling him to chill out. The woman looked down and asked if he wasn't a little young. Right after that, he flopped onto the floor, demanding she stop staring. Sun Hao saw her chance and grabbed the delivery. She thanked the delivery guy who brought the seafood. Before leaving, he mentioned that Mr. Han was the one who ordered it. Wen cut right to the chase, asking why there were only 2 servings and who he was. She weaseled her way out of it, saying he just offered her a taste. He found it amusing how considerate the FID company reps were. He leaned in and said that Hanshu was giving her the cold shoulder on Yeonjun's orders. No sooner did he call him a bad dog than the mutt dragged his cake to the trash. He looked him dead in the eye and chucked the box right in the bin. Xiaozhou was absolutely livid because of that damn dog. He decided to complain to his buddy Hao Hao about it, like always. He started saying the dog was a menace and should be gotten rid of. The Doberman just calmly turned his head, like he didn't give a damn. Hao Hao felt exhausted, like she was stuck in kindergarten. The next day, they got back to work. Wen tried to focus, but he couldn't shake what happened yesterday. He frowned, replaying the whole thing in his head again. Hao Hao got pissed and chewed him out for messing with the dog. She strong-armed him out of the house, saying she needed some space. It wasn't until he was practically out the door that he noticed the shoes in the hall. He froze, totally stunned, not believing there was a pair of men's shoes there. Wen couldn't believe he hadn't spotted them when he first arrived. He felt jealousy and despair start to close in on him, trapping him. The guy tried to force himself to knock and ask what was up, but he just couldn't. He slammed his fist into the wall, feeling his whole body shake with rage. Xiaochu decided to back off for now, not wanting to push her buttons. He somehow made it to the exit, knowing he needed to leave before things got even messier. A sinister grin twisted his face as the same question echoed in his head. These memories were driving him nuts again, making him wonder if she even had a boyfriend. He chucked his pen across the room, shouting, "Who the hell is it?" Xiaozhou racked his brain all night, but he just couldn't figure out who it was. Suddenly, he remembered those 2 orders of seafood. His mind clung to every shred of evidence that could lead him to an answer. He replayed their entire conversation in vivid detail, like he'd finally found what he needed. I think he was starting to believe it really was Hanshu. He froze, thinking that this guy was nobody to be ordering food for his Hao Hao. Still, he couldn't quite wrap his head around the reason for 2 portions. He couldn't help but wonder if someone else had been in the room at that moment. Just the thought of it was driving him insane. He started throwing his stuff around, thinking that he might still be there. His body was so boiling with rage that he broke out in a sweat. He went back to the window and slammed his fist against it. Now he understood why Hao Hao had been so eager to get rid of him. He smirked and decided this guy wouldn't be a problem. The guy's eyes widened, and he vowed that Hao Hao's little sister would be his. He called some guy and ordered him to find out 3 things. He demanded to know if Hanshu had ordered food from Junlin. On top of that, he wanted to check if Aunt Bai was really in Europe right now. He smirked before bringing up the last thing he wanted investigated. He demanded to know if Hao Hao had gotten particularly close to any guys. Xiaozhou ended the call and remembered that damn dog again. He was livid because of his aunt's annoying mutt. This whole situation pissed him off so much. His mood was changing every second. He sank into his chair, lost in thought, and decided it wasn't all bad. The guy figured this was a good chance to spend time with Hao Hao while she walked the dog. He saw potential when he remembered the dog hadn't been fixed yet. That evening, she came home and apologized for being late from work. She was surprised when he texted that Hanshu had ordered him lunch. He frowned, like he was about to ask if she thought he was some kind of chump. Hao Hao called him a clever pup and asked if the delivery guy got spooked. He couldn't help but remember how the delivery guy greeted him with a cheerful smile. That quickly turned to terror when he saw a freaking beast of a dog. Yeonjun was trying to be friendly, but he still scared the crap out of the dude. He dropped the package on the floor and bolted for the elevator as fast as he could. The poor guy accidentally smacked his head on the metal door. It was a hard enough hit that the delivery dude was out cold instantly. Hearing that, Hao Hao realized the guy almost had a heart attack from fright. She sighed, exhausted, realizing the dumbass hadn't gone hungry. She decided to compliment him, telling him he was smart no matter what shape he was in. Even though it sounded like a compliment, the Doberman still felt weird. Hao Hao explained that the last housekeeper quit, but she'd look for a new one. Yanjiao glanced at the bowl and barked, demanding to be seated at the table. Hao quickly understood what he needed and agreed that it was impolite of her. Turns out, she just thought he wanted some water. He pulled out the keyboard and started typing that he wanted to eat at the table and didn't need any cleaning ladies. Hao Hao laughed when he declared that he could cook and clean himself. The Doberman bared his teeth and promised she'd change her mind about that. He bolted the other way, while she just cracked up laughing. Hao Hao stood by the table, chugging water, waiting for him to show. As soon as she saw that mutt, she almost choked. He slapped on an apron, like he was trying to prove he's Mr. Helpful. She couldn't help picturing him in that apron. She was about to die laughing, picturing him in her mom's apron. Hao Hao teased him, saying there's no way anything would be visible this time. He started getting all worked up and barking about her laughing at him like that. The woman wiped her eyes and headed to the intercom when it buzzed. It was Xiaozhou on the camera, holding a leash and some dog food. The second he walked in, he noticed those slippers hadn't moved an inch. He also realized it was just Hao and the dog in the whole place. He froze, like something finally clicked. Wen tried to tell himself the slippers just made it look like someone was home. He happily showed her the bag and said he got it for the dumb mutt. The second he turned his head, he spotted a woman's apron. He was stunned, totally not believing what he was seeing. Xiaozhou laughed and started asking her what she'd been putting him through. Every second that passed, Yanjun felt like he was being made a fool of. Hao Hao asked him to be a little nicer to her guests. She couldn't figure out why those two just couldn't get along. She decided to lay down the law, telling them there'd be consequences if they didn't listen up. Hao threatened to kick them both out for good and never let them back in the house. Xiaozhou Wen got all huffy and asked why she was yelling at him because of the dog. He added that she looked so clueless. She probably didn't even understand what the dog was saying. He kept pushing the Doberman's buttons with his disrespect. Hao Hao froze when he asked if the dog even had a name. There was no way she could tell him it was Yanjun. She stalled, looking shifty, trying to make something up on the spot. She felt the pressure coming from both of the guys. Hao Hao stared at the mutt, racking her brain for a name. She remembered scratching that soft, smooth belly of his. And just like that, she blurted out, "Belly boy!" Xiaozhou Wen couldn't believe this big lug had a name like that. Hao Hao spun a yarn about how he was starving when they found him. He pigged out, till his stomach was about to pop, she said. With every word, Yanjun's hate for her just kept growing. Xiaozhou Wen suddenly remembered a similar story from her childhood. He chuckled, saying her and her mom had the exact same naming sense. Hao Hao couldn't help but blush, feeling the dog's eyes on her. Xiaozhou decided to change things up and pour some food for the dog. He said he hadn't seen even the basics for a dog in her place before. Hao Hao felt like she was freezing up more with every question he asked. He put the bowl on the floor and told her to take dog nutrition more seriously. The guy started lecturing about exactly what kind of food he needed. He glanced at the dog and said that a bad diet could lead to, unpleasant eating habits. He said it with such disdain that Yanjun felt his blood boil. Hao Hao noticed his angry look and knew things were going south fast. The next second, an idea popped into his head, and he started chowing down on the dog food. He filled his mouth with water and spat that mess right at the guy. Hao Hao gave the guy an awkward look and asked if he was all right. He was trying to stay cool, but that furious glare gave him away. Xiaozhou got to his feet and said he was going to go wash up. Before leaving, he shot that Doberman a real nasty, heavy look. The second they were alone, Hao Hao grabbed him by the scruff and chewed him out. She begged him to at least help her out a little and hang in there. Next thing she knew, Wen was back with his usual smile. Out of the blue, he announced he had a favor to ask her. That's how he managed to lure her to the vet clinic. At first, he didn't say exactly where they were going or what his angle was. He smirked and said the doctors here are the real deal. Wen started trying to convince her they should get the dog checked out. Hao Hao turned around, lost in thought, knowing it wasn't a dog, but a person. Wen kept pushing, saying it was important for her health, too. Hao Hao couldn't help but think she wouldn't have gone if she knew what he was planning. Just half an hour ago, he was begging her to walk the dog to honor his childhood memories. After that, she also had to persuade the dog with the strong personality. She couldn't get through to him emotionally, so she had to appeal to his self-interest. She promised she'd agree to anything he wanted after the walk. The second he caught a whiff of something good, he was all in. Little did Hao know, they were walking right into a trap. She thought she was just distracting Xiaozhou, but he played her. Suddenly, the woman realized her buddy had vanished. She looked ahead and spotted him chatting with the vets. After a quick powwow, they came over and said hi to Hao Hao. Yanjun tensed up big time when they snatched the leash from her hand. He immediately clamped down on his leash, trying to yank it free from those guys. His jaws were so powerful, he actually sent one of them sprawling. With one move, he basically took down 3 of them and stayed on his feet. The next thing you know, he charged and pounced on the last one standing. Looks like he wanted to wipe out every single threat, once and for all. Everyone froze, totally shocked, thinking he was gonna tear into that guy. He couldn't figure out why this dog was so damn savage and mean. Hao saw that another guy was threatening him and rushed to stop it. She knew this could end badly, so she nudged him with her elbow. Sun Hao was trying to convince them he wouldn't bite anyone. She stunned the man in the dog's body by saying she believed in him. Just then, Wen snuck up behind and told him not to go biting folks. All the vets were stunned when he called him Chubs. Guess that nickname helped to lighten the tense mood a little. Yanjun realized he'd gone from top dog to total laughingstock. He got pissed all over again when he felt that collar tighten around his throat. Xiaozhou smirked, saying it was just a routine checkup. The Doberman slammed him back on the floor, thinking maybe Saoi needed a head exam. Hao thought Yanjun might be hurt and helped him up. The other vets decided to focus on catching the wild mutt. They tried to grab him, but every attempt went down in flames. Song Hao decided to put an end to this madness, saying they weren't going through with the checkup. She shoved them aside, repeating that there would be no examination. The woman hugged the dog and declared she was just taking him home. He felt good, protected by the woman who owned his heart. His happiness lasted exactly until he felt the prick. In all the commotion, they didn't notice the head doctor with a syringe. He injected the dog with a sedative, leaving him unable to move. The man reassured Hao, saying it was just a tranquilizer. The girl stayed right beside her dog, now completely still. Over and over, she asked if the stuff would hurt him. The man calmly explained that the dosage was only meant to last 2 hours. He brought up the examination, but the girl and guy couldn't agree. Sun Hao snapped at Xiaozhou for sticking his nose in. She asked if he was sure the sedative wouldn't hurt the dog. He said, sounding bummed, that he was just worried because it's a stray. The doc was shocked that a purebred Doberman like that could be homeless. When kept at her, saying it was super important to get him checked out. She agreed and said she'd sleep on it. She went over to the vet to talk about taking the dog home. Hao gently stroked the animal, hoping he'd be all right. She tried to pick up the heavy, still dog. The woman's face went red when she realized her buddy was laughing at her. She hugged his muzzle to her chest and tried to wake him up. The vet figured it'd be another half hour before he woke up. He suggested we leave him for a bit and grab some coffee while we wait. Hao reluctantly agreed, 'cause what else could she do? She was calmly sipping coffee in the waiting room, keeping an eye on the dog. The vet kept reassuring her that everything was going to be all right. Then, out of nowhere, someone yelled that the dog had bolted. Before Hao could even turn around, he was a blur past her head. Everyone there saw him bust out of the building at the same time. The vet was totally stunned that he woke up so early. Hao nervously bit her finger, knowing it'd be a nightmare to find him in the dark. She turned around and saw Wen calling him Blubber Butt. The nickname was so ridiculous, everyone around them started staring. Wen egged her on, telling her to shout it louder, hoping he'd come back. Hao was mortified, thinking he should seriously consider a name change. She ran ahead, fuming about how irritating this whole thing was. The woman tried to force the nickname out, but she just couldn't do it. Eventually, she decided to start randomly asking people if they'd seen him. She was sure he was capable of causing some kind of trouble somewhere. But still, everyone she asked said they hadn't seen him. Her legs carried her to a big city park, a place he might go running. She was searching high and low for the dog, jumping at every little sound. She crept up to the bush and whispered his name, real soft. But wouldn't you know it, a little black kitten peeked out instead. She sighed, totally exhausted, mentally cursing the mess she'd gotten into. Wen tried to offer a hand, but she shut him down quick. She told him the dog might be scared of him and ordered him back home. The woman was about ready to lose it. She couldn't find him anywhere. Her first thought was that he'd been cornered and roughed up by other dogs. Her mind started playing out a million worst-case scenarios. Just the thought of something like that happening was enough to make her head explode. She felt a weird pain in her chest and thought, "No way, this can't be happening." The woman kept telling herself, "He's tough, he can handle himself." But she couldn't shake the image of his vulnerable body. She sighed, exhausted, and promised herself, "He's gonna be all right, he just has to be." Hao took off, sprinting ahead, yelling his name. She searched all night, but came up empty every time. Freezing her butt off, she decided to run inside and grab a jacket. She was beyond shocked when she found her dog. I don't think he expected to see her again either, not after everything that went down. Sun Hao walked towards him, legs like lead, and dropped her phone. She hugged her dog tight and asked him why he ran off like that. The woman broke down, saying how worried sick she'd been about him. He couldn't say anything back, but his heart was overflowing with affection. These sudden feelings caused his whole body to start glowing. Hao squeezed her eyes shut, trying to figure out what was happening to him. The next thing she knew, the feeling in her hands had completely changed. As she ran her hands over his broad back, it finally started to dawn on her. She looked into his eyes, surprised, and saw nothing but tenderness there. Sun Hao started trembling from the shock when she realized he'd transformed again. She tried to pull away, but he just pressed himself closer to her chest. His breath scorched her neck, and she shoved him away hard. His body was so weak, he slammed right into the cabinet behind him. His head was pounding from the drugs, so he told her to take it easy. He pressed her hand to his chest, saying the anesthetic hadn't worn off yet. Looks like Sun Hao was so captivated by him, she didn't even hear what he said. The man noticed her confusion and pinned both her hands to himself. He suddenly killed the lights in the room and caressed her cheeks. The next moment, he was kissing her lips, his breath hot against them. She tried to figure out what he was planning, but they both went down to the floor. The woman felt his bare body pressing down on her. She told him to get the hell off her, but got zero response. Hao finally got up and realized he was passed out, snoring like a chainsaw. She somehow managed to shove him off and crashed out herself. The next morning, she was like, "Why does my back feel like I got hit by a truck?" Then it all came flooding back, Yeonjun collapsing on top of her. She jumped out of bed and rushed to check on him. It took everything she had to drag his sorry butt inside last night. Still, she couldn't get him upstairs, so she just left him by the door. She threw on her pajamas and hurried to see if he was awake. Imagine her surprise when she smelled something delicious. Turns out, he woke up on his own, showered, got dressed, and started making breakfast. Hao looked at him from behind, remembering how recently she'd been hugging that back. Like he felt her staring, he asked if she liked what she saw. Hao tried to hide how thrilled she was, and said it was all right, she guessed. She tried to hide behind a confident smile, but her blush gave her away. Seeing her reaction, a happy grin spread across his face. He couldn't help himself and went over to kiss her forehead. Now he really did look like the perfect husband from a K-drama. Hao tried to force out a word and reminded him the food was on the stove. The guy replied that he'd already turned off the electric stove ages ago. She just happened to mention his dish might burn, and he decided to mess with her about it. Yeonjun smirked and said she couldn't catch fire, since she's electric. He saw her blush and cracked up, calling her a total dork. After that, he suggested they dig into the breakfast he'd made. He saw how excited she was, and said there was almost nothing left in the fridge. She felt a little stung, like he was taking a dig at her. He said he'd handle the kitchen from now on, so she'd be happy. Hao was thrilled to hear that and asked if his special time was over. He did a spit take with his coffee, realizing she'd made that comparison. She laughed and asked how often that would be happening. With every word she said, Yeonjun got more and more pissed. He sighed, all worn out, and asked why he always folded so easily around her. Hao was surprised he could even pretend to be defenseless. She decided to mess with him and said they could just call it quits. Before she could even finish, he shoved a strawberry in her mouth, just like that. He smirked and said she definitely needed the vitamins. Hao really started thinking and asked him to tell her his whole story from the beginning. He was blown away that she actually wanted to help him out. The woman turned away and coldly replied, she just wanted to get this over with faster. That stung to hear, but he still decided to tell her everything. His family's always been mixed up with forces nobody can explain. According to the family chronicles, those forces are tied to their massive fortune. He explained that the chronicles are an ancient scroll filled with their history. Unfortunately, the early stuff, before the curse, is missing. After the family got cursed, records about it started showing up way more often. They were probably scared they wouldn't be able to keep the family line going. That's why they went into such detail about how to find a suitable partner. Hao perked up and asked if that scroll still exists. She calmed down, figuring he might not want to spill the family secrets. Yanjun squeezed her hands and told her not to hold back with him. He promised to lay it all out, tell him the whole story of his family, no holding back. The guy admitted it bummed him out when she acted so guarded. He decided he was going to be straight with her from day one. On top of that, he was worried she might pull away from him because of what he was. After that wreck, he lost his memory for a while, which was a total nightmare. His mom was worried it would upset Hao and cause her a whole lot of grief. She put her foot down, said nobody should tell him about the girl. He was scared of forgetting something important, and scared someone important would forget him. Back then, he only vaguely remembered that figure he held so dear. The fear of running out of time was eating at him, stressing him out big time. Even so, he still couldn't quite remember what set him off. He rubbed the back of his neck and grinned, going on with his story. After getting his memories back, he was scared she'd reject him because of his limp. He smiled and said she had no idea how much effort it took for him to even stand before her. She burst into tears when he added that everything he had belonged to her, and she could trust him. Yanjun totally killed the mood by talking about how hard it was to trick her into marrying him. Her dramatic reaction instantly switched to annoyance. Dude didn't even seem to get why she was suddenly so pissed. She yelled, totally furious, that he actually managed to fool her. In the end, his little prank earned him a good smack. Hao gave a sheepish smile and held out the cold compress to him. Yangun made it clear he was really hurting now. She felt a twinge of guilt, even though she barely tapped him. She'd hurt his feelings when she implied he was too delicate. He decided to play along, saying he actually needed her protection. Hao shut him down quick, saying with those muscles, he didn't need any protecting. She was about to end the session, but he hinted she was forgetting something. He reminded her how she used to blow on his nose when he was a dog. Hao was annoyed that even now he was trying to get something out of her. She loomed over him like a ghost and told him he'd lost his mind. She came at him with that compress like she was trying to get even or something. Right after that, she was all business, rushing to get ready for work. You'd never guess she'd just been giving him a hard time a minute ago. She looked so damn good, even Yanjun was speechless. She just brushed off his staring and told him to bring the company reports home. She stepped out, giving him a quick smile before she left. Before she could even close the door, he grabbed her from behind, pulling her close. She was trying to figure out what he was up to, but he just turned her around to face him. He gently kissed his wife on the forehead and told her to be careful out there. That little gesture totally messed with her focus for the rest of the morning. Her eyes darted across the papers like she was desperately searching for something to hold on to. Wen sauntered into her office and asked if she'd found the mutt yet. She might have let the casual stuff slide before, but he'd just crossed a line. This was the moment she finally decided to unload everything she'd been holding back. She told her secretary to get out, then addressed him by his full name, cold as ice. Sun Hao took a deep breath before she went on the offensive with her complaints. She ripped into him for barging in without so much as a heads up. The woman asked if he didn't have a secretary or a schedule to follow. She reminded him that he needed to respect her plans in every aspect of her life. Wen tried to play innocent while silently blaming that damn dog all over again. Hao calmed down and handed him the Darren Technologies Company materials. He glanced at the document, deep in thought, and asked if they could handle a company that big. They weren't shy about stabbing us in the back when Yunding was going through hell. That's why she's spent all these years wanting to get even and screw up their plans. She was surprised when she heard that Han Shu had arrived at the office. Sun Hao smiled happily and asked them to invite him in. Xiao Zhou immediately tensed up, trying to figure out what he'd done to deserve her happy laughter. Luckily, his dear little sister didn't notice his weird reaction. She had no idea until recently that Han Shu had been meeting with the CEO of Fuan. The CEO was trying every trick in the book to squeeze information out of him, but it was all for nothing. He wanted to know how many shareholders would be affected by their decision. He asked if he had any shame for every single cent he squeezed out of ordinary folks. This news report caused a major uproar, and Fuan's stock has been tanking for 4 days straight. They thought the situation was seriously messed up, because nobody was willing to budge. She asked Yonggi what he thought about Fidi sending Han Shu. The girl immediately started thinking, trying to factor in his background in journalism. He seemed outgoing, but he also gave off the vibe of a hidden trap. She added that without a business deal, She wouldn't trust him as far as she could throw him. Hao Hao laughed and praised her for her killer instincts. He barely got into the office before he started making moves on the secretary. He was all over the staff, like a total puppy dog, so eager to please. Sun Hao Hao had seen his head literally turn into a dog's head before. She smirked, thinking Yonggi was right to be so critical of him. The woman had no idea what employee Xiaozhou was really thinking. He shot him such a death glare, like he could turn him to stone. The guy smiled and tried to chat with CEO Sun again. Sun got suspicious, figuring this smooth talker was after more than just coffee and pastries. She smiled and suggested he come work for them for the perks. He played it off, saying they should continue this over at the cafeteria. Sun Hao Hao knew right away his offer wasn't just about coffee. He told her to get rid of all the hidden bugs and cameras ASAP, make it discreet. She figured their data must have leaked somewhere if he found them. He said the rival company's been aggressively hitting up a major commercial bank for backing. Turns out, the analyst at that bank is the same guy who reps their company overseas. With the bank's support, Darren Technologies could weather the storm. Not only that, they'd be able to seriously cement their position in the market. All this meant they needed to act fast, like yesterday. He ran a thorough check on the R&D files and found no sign of a leak. That's why he started thinking the problem's gotta be inside her company. Hanshu grabbed his miniature bug detector and headed out. He made a point of walking through a few departments, saying hi to everyone. The signal was picked up at the girls' place, in Eileen's office, and in Sun Hao Hao's office too. He stood up straight and said the detector in her office was screaming so loud it was giving her tinnitus. The woman was floored by this unexpected news. She realized that a leak this big could take down Yunding. She doubted anyone would go to such lengths just to save Darren Technologies. Hanshu added that, just by chance, he'd also walked past her car. She was even more shocked to hear that her car was bugged too. The woman rushed to discuss this intel with her inner circle. She turned to Yonggi and asked for her take on all this. One look at her, and you could tell her brain was fried. That said a lot, because she hadn't looked that rattled in ages. After a minute, she finally asked if the dining hall was bugged. Sun Hao Hao took a sip of coffee and said there was nothing there. She added that she needed to hear both their opinions before doing anything. Yonggi suggested hiring an outside security firm, so none of their employees would have access. Wen tensed up and said that Hao was currently responsible for the company's security. He was shocked when she straight up said he wasn't cutting it. Sun Hao cut them off and said she just needed concrete suggestions. He agreed with Yonggi's suggestion and announced they were putting their takeover plan on hold. He wanted to know why she trusted Hanshu and his company so much. The woman sighed, sounding beat, and said they could have gotten way more intel if they hadn't ditched the wiretap. Wen started up again about how Yanjun was definitely shady. Song Hao shut him down, telling him he needed to focus on other stuff. She told him off, ordering him to keep his mouth shut if he couldn't handle it. He was absolutely livid, a boiling pot of resentment ready to blow. The guy kicked a chair aside and declared himself Yunding's good luck charm. He glared at her, asking why she even bothered asking for his opinion. Song Hao tried to stop him, but he just turned around and stormed out. His reaction made her start second-guessing herself, wondering if she was the problem. She knew doing this with Yonggi around was a bad idea. The woman remembered that "hear no evil" thing he said, which went right over her head. Yonggi was surprised she didn't know what it meant. Seeing her boss's confusion, she figured she should explain it. It's about the three monkeys, the ones that don't hear, don't see, and don't speak. It sounded so ridiculous. She couldn't help but crack up. She made a wild gesture, and coffee went flying all over her coworker's shirt. She tried to apologize, but she still couldn't stop laughing. Hada was like, "Seriously, I didn't mean to," and started wiping the shirt. But her clumsy wiping seemed to be making things worse, not better. Yonggi could feel her anger building with every second. She called her actions out of line and reached for a cup. Yonggi clocked the woman upside the head and reminded her that she had a cup too. She grinned menacingly and suggested she could do the same to her. Sun Hao Hao grabbed her mug and asked why she had to be so rough. She managed to buy her off by offering to pick out a couple of new dresses on her tab. Right after that, they got back to their usual grind. Sun Hao Hao was paying close attention to every suggestion her assistant made. It wasn't until sunset that they finally remembered about poor old Wen being all bent out of shape. Sun Hao Hao decided to nip this whole thing in the bud right then and there. She said Yonggi was her right hand and only had to answer to her, not him. Sun Hao added that even though he didn't have much experience, his skills were solid. She was trying to explain that his behavior was just a phase. Yonggi just became even more convinced that she had no idea about Wenzhou's feelings. The second she walked in, she started wondering if she should drop a hint. Meanwhile, Xiaozhou was still holed up in his office. He felt totally betrayed, consumed by resentment and rage. He was over the moon when he heard Madame Soon was there to see him. He instantly remembered how sharply she'd put him in his place. Just one sentence from her was enough to completely kill his buzz. He flopped dramatically on the couch and told her to come in. She calmly entered the room, taking in the scene. Just from the way he was sitting, she knew he wasn't going to let her off easy. He was acting like a total baby, but she always forgave him for it. She nudged his legs with her elbow, telling him to make some room. Without a word, the guy quickly pulled his legs up. Sun Hao Hao looked at her old friend, sensing a dark vibe coming from him. She stroked his leg, and some childhood memories came flooding back. He used to come over to her place to study, then fall asleep because of nightmares. Back then, she'd pat him on the back, but now she could only reach his shin. She was trying to get to him with those memories, but she didn't know he wanted more than just friendship. He scoffed dramatically, making it clear he didn't want to talk. The woman sighed wearily, like she still saw the kid he used to be. She looked up, summing up just how damn hard this journey had been for them. Joan turned around, like what she said totally caught him off guard. She smiled and said he'd grown up, and now anything was possible for him. The woman told him not to worry about anyone eavesdropping and said she'd handle it. Her smile made him feel so warm. He even laid his head on her lap. He looked into her eyes and agreed, adding that he believed what she said. Wen still remembered her saying her father came from a distinguished family. Every time, she'd smile and say a daughter from this family would be tough. Just hearing about her father, she felt a pang in her chest. She couldn't help but remember him sweet-talking mom, praising her cooking. Sadly, their happiness was wiped out in a car crash. She remembered sobbing in the waiting room, hearing he was gone. Her life was falling apart, piece by piece. But Xiaozhou was there. He understood her like no one else. Being a complete orphan himself, he squeezed her hand, practically begging to stay by her side. She looked down and said keeping the company alive was her father's legacy. He was ready to do anything for Uncle Wen and believed in their brotherhood. She said that even though she's hard on him sometimes, it's only because she can't help how she feels. Wen just lay there silently in her lap, like he used to when he was a kid. He didn't like it when she told him not to get upset, like her little brother. Sun Hao Hao figured he was bummed out because she brought up his dad. To her surprise, all he said was that he didn't want to just be a little brother. She thought he was talking about taking over the company, but she was wrong again. Wen jumped up and yelled at her to stop saying that stuff. He coldly asked if she ever even saw him as a man. She said she did see him as a man, and that sooner or later, Yunding would be his. She thought he was after the business, but all he wanted was her heart. He was getting sick of her telling him he could be running the whole show right now. He pulled her closer, asking if she really saw him as a man. Meanwhile, Yanjun sat alone on the couch, waiting for his woman. It was already 10 p.m., and every minute felt like an hour. He tried to find out what he should make for dinner, but she coldly replied that she was busy. The man sighed, annoyed, and felt this overwhelming urge to bring his wife home. He remembered her demands about him not crossing any lines at work. That's why he put his phone down, just picturing the moment he'd see her. He smiled, realizing that his heart was completely and utterly hers. The man practically jumped off the couch when he heard her voice. She closed the door behind her and froze, hearing his cheerful voice. Hao Hao didn't even expect anyone to greet her with such a sweet smile. Thinking she was tired, he rushed to pull her into a hug. She coldly pushed him away, reminding him of their agreement. The woman smiled menacingly, saying that if he broke it, he'd be out on his ear. There was nothing left for him to do but meekly take her bag. She wearily took off her trench coat, saying she hadn't had a chance to eat yet. He smiled and suggested she relax, while he whipped something up. After a while, he was ready to present his masterpiece. The moment he got close to her, his plans immediately changed. He found her so exhausted, she'd actually fallen asleep. She was so wiped out from the day, she even forgot about food. The guy quietly set the tray on the table and moved closer to her. He got a real kick out of seeing her so relaxed and at home. His eyes were overflowing with tenderness, watching his sweetheart sleep. Yeonjun quietly turned off the light, then covered her with a blanket. He sat down on the floor, gently touching her fingers in the lamplight. Just the warmth of her body made him feel like all his hard work was worth it. He slowly leaned closer to her face, like he was savoring every second. He wanted to kiss her, but he held back and decided to just be there with her. He bolted upright in the middle of the night when he heard her calling for her dad. Half asleep, she tried to get up, but almost ate it on the floor. He shielded her just in time, breaking her fall with his own body. He felt a jolt in his back and didn't realize right away she was crying again. She was awake now, but still kept calling out for her dead father. Yeonjun held her close, trying to calm her down, telling her it was just a bad dream. Her hands started shaking, and she remembered seeing her dad in the dream. They were in the middle of some lake, but he was walking so fast she couldn't catch up. That thought just twisted the knife, 'cause she'd been missing him for so long. He gently stroked her cheeks and begged her to stop crying. He smiled softly and said again that it was all just a dream. Sun Hao looked at him like he was her last lifeline. He gently stroked her hair and told her he'd never leave her. His words were so warm and comforting that her face flushed. The whole time, that gentle, familiar smile never left his face. As soon as it clicked, she jumped back and said she'd just tripped. She sat down on the couch and realized her shin was killing her. He wanted to help her, but then realized his back was also in serious pain. In the end, she had to rub some pain relief ointment on his back. She roughly rubbed the ointment into his back, making him wince in pain. She kept teasing him, saying his back needed a good rub-down. Hao was surprised he got hurt for her, but her foot still stung like hell. He frowned, pissed, saying whoever did this was gonna regret it big time. He froze, eyes wide, like he'd just overheard something he shouldn't have. The guy stood up and demanded she repeat what she just said. He smirked and asked if she was saying he was protecting his girl. Yeonjun sprawled out on the bed, satisfied now that she'd basically admitted to being his girl. The woman stayed silent, knowing how hard it was to resist this player. He still couldn't shake the words about him failing to protect his girl. He decided to offer his apology as her man and kissed her. After that whole mess, he showed up at work with deadlines breathing down his neck. He was acting like the world wasn't ending around him. Right then, Hanshu figured that evil smirk meant trouble was brewing. Little did the assistant know, that wasn't the half of it. Hanshu hit the floor when he heard he'd locked lips with Hao. It seemed so impossible, he just couldn't wrap his head around it. He remembered with a goofy grin how Hao had gently rubbed medicine on his back. Guess he was so head over heels, his imagination ran wild. The second he mentioned being shirtless, a folder went flying at his head. Hanshu yelled, saying he didn't need the play-by-play of any of that. He finally managed to get his boss to buckle down and get to work. He was still trying to process that wild story he just heard. The assistant was pissed after busting his ass all morning, only to hear that. Yeonjun was still sitting there, beaming like he'd won the lottery. He slyly looked away, deciding he was definitely gonna ruin his mood. He smirked and dropped the bomb that Song's company had been bugged. Against all odds, he turned around and told him to call her sister-in-law. He couldn't believe one woman had turned his boss into a blithering idiot. Hanshu thought he'd get a negative reaction, but it was the opposite. He added dreamily that Song Hao could handle this herself, no problem. This guy suggested we hold up before moving on to the next phase. He wanted to know if Shuji's reputation was all patched up yet. For the past couple of years, he's been working mid-level in advanced security. Hanshu asked why he was so sure Yunding would choose his direction. Yeonjun smirked and said he'd spill the beans if he wired him 100 yuan. Hanshu balked at first, but he still transferred it to the boss's account. Yeonjun glanced at the screen and said he knew Yunding's choices better than anyone. The assistant went red when the boss said he was crushing on someone there. He immediately stammered that it wasn't like that at all, and he didn't like anyone. He blushed even harder, saying she barely talks to him, except about work stuff. My guy was about to clock his boss with a chair when he started mocking him. Yeonjun was giving some pep talk about never giving up for love. Hanshu figured he was full of it, but couldn't prove it. The boss grabbed his shoulders, saying he needed to swallow his pride. He asked, dead serious, if anything looked different about his lips. After thinking for a sec, Hanshu noticed she had a busted lip. It looked like he might have bitten her or something. She looked annoyed. He grinned and said, How? Nipped her during a kiss. All his happy talk was driving poor Hanshu up the wall. He was starting to lose it, but Yeonjun bailed out of the office just in time. He just bailed on the company, said he was jetting off to another country for a couple of days. His assistant was stuck holding the bag. No choice but to deal. He blew a gasket, screaming across the office for his 100 yuan back. Meanwhile, Madame Song was totally spaced out too. She barely even registered what Yonggi, who was pissed, was saying. The girl had to yell right in her ear just to get her attention. Hao, lost in her own world, gave a sheepish smile and asked her to repeat that. Yonggi got a bad feeling, noticed she wasn't acting like herself at all. Hao blushed even harder when she remembered what went down yesterday. She said nothing happened, but all she could see was him. The woman flushed red and held her hands out, trying to throw her assistant off the scent. With each passing second, she was sinking deeper and deeper into what happened yesterday. Finally, it all came rushing back. How she kissed him, gripping his strong shoulders. I guess just thinking about it was enough to shatter her tough guy act. She started pacing around the room, which was making Yonggi think some weird stuff. The girl firmly insisted that she spill the beans about what went down. Hao went even redder when she realized she was talking about the kiss. Yonggi clapped a hand over her mouth and said she'd already heard everything she said. She decided to visit her apartment so they wouldn't have to talk about it at the office. The moment she got to her place, she spotted all the matching couple stuff. All these little things screamed that Hao wasn't lonely anymore. She yelled at Hao, saying at this rate she'd turn into a total airhead. The woman defensively covered her ears and said that Yonggi was no saint herself. She added that single-celled organisms aren't that simple, then plopped down on the couch. The girl towered over her and said she wasn't exactly thrilled to talk about evolution. She tried again to pry information about the woman's new special someone. The next second, the front door swung open, announcing Yeonjun's arrival. Yonggi instantly tensed up, expecting to see her boyfriend. She was surprised by how casually he called her darling when he got home. The man was just slipping on his slippers and asked if they had company. Yonggi's hand started shaking, and she thought she was seeing things. Standing right there, staring at her, was the last guy she expected to see. Hao rushed to cover her mouth before she blurted out everything on her mind. Yeonjun told her to sit up straight and stop crowding as Hao. The assistant did as she was told, but she was still taken aback by how he said it. She asked if he was the one messing with Hao's head all the time. Hao tried to cover for her, saying they were just talking business. He just smiled silently, thinking how cute she looked trying to explain. Hao got so flustered she almost choked Yonggi out. Eventually, she only stopped when her arm gave out. She immediately grabbed Yonggi, looking guilty, and asked if she was okay. As soon as she got her bearings, she walked away on legs like jelly. Hao wanted to call her a cab, but the girl flat out refused. In the end, there was nothing she could do but let her go. Yeonjun smirked and said she was just a little freaked out. He closed the apartment door and said it would pass with time. Hao was surprised when he said something similar happened with Hanshu. He kept that sly smile and went on about Hanshu's reaction to their kiss. She was mortified when he added that the assistant hit the floor and just stayed there. Yeonjun ignored her question and said he was just really craving some kisses. Hao jumped back, saying he'd ambushed her when she wasn't ready. He pinned her to the wall and asked if she was on guard, now. He didn't even let her answer, before trapping her against the wall and laying a passionate kiss on her. Their tongues locked instantly, letting them taste the full depth of their feelings. Hao was fully aware of everything happening, but she couldn't bring herself to resist. After a moment, she glared at the guy, clearly displeased. He was struck again by how expertly she maintained her distance. He tried to explain he wasn't doing it on purpose, but his head suddenly turned into a dog's. The woman got even angrier and snapped that she didn't believe him. She said normal couples don't kiss until their lips are sore. He stared at her, thinking about how cute her swollen lips looked. He put on an innocent face and apologized for getting a little carried away. The guy offered to let her be in charge next time, promising to do whatever she wanted. Hao wearily touched her forehead, like she was trying to keep it together. After that, he confessed that he needed her help before he left the country. The woman smiled and asked if he was going after the family history. He looked away, embarrassed. When she said she'd help him with anything, Yeonjun looked straight into her eyes and asked to borrow her skirt. He started saying that even a pair of her socks or stockings would work. She got serious and asked if it was needed for some kind of magical ritual. The dude blushed, looked away, and said he was afraid he'd forget her scent. His face was so damn innocent, it hit her right in the feels. As soon as she processed what he said, she called him a total pervert. The next day, he headed to the airport for his flight. Everyone passing by was whispering, giving him knowing looks. Seemed like he couldn't care less about the hand-shaped mark on his cheek. The whole time, he had this smug, proud grin plastered on his face. Everyone was weirded out that he was wearing a thick scarf in this heat. A couple hours later, he finally arrived at the airport back home. He stopped at the entrance with his suitcase, waiting for his ride. Yeonjun spun around when he heard a voice that was painfully familiar. Standing before him was Balo, his loyal servant, decked out in his best uniform. Balo was the nephew of their butler, Carson, and a real mountain of a man. He greeted his master with a smile and grabbed his luggage. But that manly grin vanished when he gave Jan a closer look. His first thought was that the scarf was because he was coming down with something. The man smirked and said he was doing just fine, thanks to the scarf. Balo couldn't figure out why he was so cheerful today. He decided he'd definitely tell his uncle about this weird behavior. Yeonjun saw his worry and told him he really didn't need to sweat the scarf. He proudly added that he didn't just get married, he got married for love. The whole time, Balo had no clue he was wearing his wife's scarf. After that, the guy pointed out a seriously sweet sports car to him. Yeonjun was taken by surprise, seeing a brand new ride in front of him. He smirked and asked if Sularisi Vaughn had bought another new car again. The guy was ready to change the subject, but Balo was still reeling from the news. He snapped his pen in half from the shock of realizing his boss got hitched. Balo yelled across the entire airport, like he just couldn't believe it. Yeonjun decided to take advantage of his confusion and hopped behind the wheel. He happily drove the car, whistling a tune along the way. Balo was still reeling from the fact that the boss got hitched. Yeonjun was flooring it so hard, the car was practically smoking. The second he pulled up to the house, the servants were there to greet him. Standing right there was Carson, the big guy, Balo's uncle. He gave a deep bow and held the door open for the boss. Imagine his surprise when he saw Balo in the passenger seat. Yeonjun hopped out and greeted Uncle Carson with a smile. He gave a confident grin and complimented the guy on staying in shape. Carson smiled, trying to figure out why he was driving himself. He gave Balo's ear a good yank and ordered a servant to park the car. After that, he hauled Balo behind the pillar, not pulling any punches. He tried to explain himself, but Uncle Carson wasn't having any of it. The staff felt a chill when Carson said he needed to be taught a lesson. Yeonjun cleared his throat politely, drawing everyone's attention. Carson immediately went over and asked if he was all right. He smiled and explained that Balo was just a little worked up after hearing about his marriage. Carson nodded, agreeing that he shouldn't have been driving. Yeonjun stepped into the house and asked if his parents were home. The butler replied that both his mother and father had gone to Biza City. He added that his father wanted to feel the desert wind to get some inspiration. He was blown away by his dad, whose only inspiration was his mom. Yeonjun headed upstairs, said he was going to crash for a bit after that flight. He ordered a bunch of dishes for dinner, then asked for them to be put on the tab. Carson just nodded, like he didn't even hear the part about wanting to tutor them. With every new detail, he became more and more convinced that the boss was head over heels. He was ready to chew his own arm off and furiously yelled for Balo. The man was going out of his mind until he saw his nephew, all beat up. He started shaking him like crazy, demanding he spill everything. The butler couldn't wrap his head around Yeonjun getting married for a long time. He was beside himself because Balo hadn't told him anything useful. Blew my mind that they still tied the knot after I spilled the family dirt. He started thinking about the curse, and that girl popped into his head. Carson started wondering if she'd actually accepted him, quirks and all. He was about ready to smash the clock. Time was crawling by so damn slow. In his sleep, Yeonjun relived that accident all over again. Over and over, he saw that truck bearing down on his car. He didn't catch the pure evil plastered on the driver's face. That scumbag was practically giddy to carry out the hit and smash him up. Even messed up as he was, he remembered Hao's performance. It haunted him all these years, but it gave him the drive to keep going. He finally woke up when Carson announced that dinner was ready. Yeonjun announced it was time for him to leave and ordered a ticket on the next flight out. The butler was surprised he wasn't even going to wait for his parents. He scratched the back of his head and said he'd only come for the family history. Carson beamed and asked if he'd really gotten married. Yeonjun smiled proudly and replied that it wasn't a big deal. Carson managed to pry out that it was Madame Song from Yunding. He was over the moon and asked if they'd managed to break the curse. The man frowned sadly and said they hadn't lifted it. The butler was floored, not believing that even that hadn't worked. Right after that conversation, Yeonjun headed straight to the dining hall. He chewed on his dinner, lost in some seriously dark thoughts. Suddenly, the guy noticed his wine was overflowing the glass. He turned to the butler and told him to keep it together. Carson was bawling, completely heartbroken by his master's bad luck. Yeonjun felt his pain and decided to try and calm him down. He explained it was just a temporary setback in breaking the curse. Butler Carson just kept on sobbing, calling him poor thing. He was so crushed by the news that Yeonjun had to get up. The guy declared that he was actually really happy because he'd managed to get married. He started wiping away the guy's tears, saying his dream had finally come true. He asked him to explain how his mom managed to break the curse. The butler said they fell in love first, and then they got married. He mentioned that their family history had at least 3 instances of them getting where they were through scheming, seizing, or just plain brute force. Carson added that he'd be the 4th if he could lift the curse. Yeonjun wiped away his tears again and reminded him he was already halfway there. Carson declared that the hardest part was the half he hadn't finished yet. Yeonjun wondered how his mom had gotten his dad to fall for her. Butler Carson proudly reminded him that she was a real looker. Yeonjun's face fell, and he asked if it was just because of her fair skin. Looks like they didn't get that there's a whole lot more to love than just, that. The guy smirked, all proud, and said that put his mind at ease. Meanwhile, Madame Soon was still grinding away at work. Yonggi brought in a box full of spy gadgets the service had found. On top of that, Wen fired a bunch of key guys from security. Sun Hao Hao was stoked about the awesome job they'd done. She couldn't help but wonder how much dirt their rivals had managed to dig up. Yonggi said there hadn't been any damage from data leaks so far. That struck Hao Hao as weird, so she asked about the competitor's situation. The head of key accounts at FIDI got real cozy with the foreign division of the National Bank. Looks like they were trying to cash in their political favors and ride out the storm. Sun Hao Hao realized that meant she wouldn't be able to take down that company anytime soon. She shot up and declared that they still had a shot at this. She added that they needed to play it smart and take it one step at a time. Yonggi chimed in, saying that after the meeting, a request was put in to use one particular system. She was leveraging the company's internal structure and department coordination to her advantage. Hao Hao asked her what the heck she needed to use it for right now. Final approval hinged on Mr. Wen's decision. He was young, so he refused to authorize it, which Sun Hao had no idea about. She was floored that such a critical decision was made behind her back. The board's decisions were getting rubber-stamped without even a discussion. Sun Hao was absolutely livid about their final call. It pissed her off that the board thought they could just do whatever they wanted. Yonggi summed it up. Right now, all the heat's on her. Sun Hao Hao was floored that Yonggi was talking about her like that. This system was cooked up by some tiny company, which is why Wen passed on it. That made her think his decision might not have anything to do with her, after all. Yonggi sighed, exhausted, and remembered that director, Shijuan Xianxing. He used to be her classmate, Sun Hao Hao. The woman thoughtfully reached for her phone, trying to jog her memory about the guy. No sooner did she open the chat than she saw a photo her husband had sent. The message said he was her little houseplant, and she shouldn't dream about anyone else. Like she was hypnotized, she started typing a reply, calling him out on his BS. The woman accidentally dropped her phone when Yonggi called him a stalker. Her gesture showed she was off in La La Land again. She looked at Yonggi, startled, and asked what stalker she was talking about. The next day, she decided to meet with the creator of that system. She carefully described exactly what her company needed. Xu Rixon doubted that the system was right for their situation at the moment. He suggested she send employees from the project department to the testing sites. The woman smiled and promised they'd cooperate. Ruochin tensed up and said they'd sent some real hard asses. He barely finished the sentence when a girl burst into the office. She demanded to know if he was totally broke or something. Looks like she was against them taking the Yunding company's order. Shu Rixin tried to calm her down, saying it wasn't what she thought. She told him to not help them, reminding him what they did 3 years ago. Song Hao Hao calmly stated that his employees were definitely something else. She smiled and asked why he was outsourcing the company's projects. The girl got so angry, she looked like she was about to blow her top. She straight up claimed she carried the whole damn project when they built their corporate system. Sun Hao gave her props and then asked her to jump ship to Yunding. They were floored by how sneaky she was trying to poach her. She went on about how Shu Rixin busted his ass, but all their work went down the drain. She added she couldn't stand Yunding and then called her out for even suggesting it. Sun Hao Hao complimented her quick wit, but then questioned if she was really all that. The girl frowned and asked if she was trying to intimidate her or something. She smirked all sly and said that people like her are why they can't ever come to an agreement. The woman winked at the employee and said she thought she was cute. Shu Rixin laughed and said she's always trying to get a rise out of everyone. As soon as she got in the car, she burst out laughing about everything that had just happened. Yonggi thought Shu was her stalker, but it turned out to be Mu Rongqiao. Out of the blue, the assistant asked her what was going on between her and Yanjun. The woman blushed and said she was just helping him out in return for his kindness. Yonggi told her to take off the rose-tinted glasses and look at her own flushed face. She looked at the woman and asked her to tell her how their relationship started. Hao Hao got indignant and tried to insist that there was nothing between them. She couldn't help but remember the day she first started feeling something for him. A snapshot flashed in her mind of him cooking in an apron. Guess her imagination was trying to prove she was fooling herself. She turned away and said things were way more complicated than she thought. Yonggi asked suspiciously what kind of help goes on between a guy and a girl living together. She sighed wearily and asked if he was playing her. The girl admitted she understood, considering his situation and abilities. Sun Hao darkly pondered the suggestion that she get involved with them. She used to think she could stay away from guys like that. She always figured a guy surrounded by other women just wasn't her type. Because of that, she always thought she wasn't interested in him. She believed the love between a man and a woman should be like a parent's love. In this world, her father only ever had eyes for her mother. He always said that seeing his wife was enough to make him smile all day long. Her parents were totally, undeniably devoted to each other. She couldn't help but wonder if she'd ever deserve something like that. Their story kicked off when he asked her to help break a curse. He made her want to protect him and take care of him, even if in different ways. He always picked her up from work, no matter how late it was. She remembered when he confessed his love to her, and he wasn't lying. Sun Hao couldn't figure out when she started caring so damn much. A couple days later, Yanjun was still stuck in that fancy-ass palace. He frowned and asked his parents if they were trying to screw him over. His dad smirked and said he was, exactly, the one who should meet Lillian. He shot back that he wasn't interested, and he was already spoken for with Hao Hao. His dad was floored that the girl actually went along with it. Yanjun demanded they stop trying to set them up. His dad asked if he'd somehow managed to pull the wool over Song Hao Hao's eyes. Yanjun started arguing and defending himself, but his dad was already over it. His mom grabbed the phone and told him to cut to the chase. Yanjun explained that they got hitched, but it didn't break the curse. He added that he wanted to let her dive into the family history to figure out why. The woman laughed when she realized his assumptions were way off base. She asked him exactly how he planned to do it, and if he was even up to the task. The Chronicle was a document that took generations to put together. At first, it was just notes, but it eventually became a complete record. Their ancestors documented everything for a chance to break the curse. They used the fanciest embellishments, expensive binding, and paper. Descendants could redo it if they thought the design was outdated. Over time, it got bigger and bigger, eventually weighing in at 100 pounds. Yanjun was blown away by the mountain of books, practically taller than a man. He was going to take it, but just looking at it, you knew it'd be a pain to lift. Balo flexed his muscles and said he could handle it himself. Yanjun figured he could just snap photos of all the pages with his phone. Balo was like, "Why didn't you just get Carson to take the pics for you?" Deep down, he was kicking himself for coming all this way. He jumped up when he got a call telling him to get back ASAP. Yanjun went white as a sheet when he heard that Hao Hao had been stabbed. In that instant, his legs turned to jelly from the fear and the pain. The guy clutched his chest and begged them to get him on a flight, any way possible. Just a few hours earlier, Hao Hao had been waiting for Xiaozhou. She'd arrived at 8 p.m. for their dinner date. The woman thoughtfully watched the people passing by as she waited for her friend. Seeing that dog run by kinda reminded her of her old Doberman. She spun around on edge when she heard those weird screams. The woman spotted a guy in the distance who looked just like Xiaozhou. She bolted towards him, trying to figure out who he was talking to. Hao Hao was totally oblivious to the bus barreling right at her. Luckily, she managed to stop just in time, and the driver sped on by. She looked away for just a second, and they were gone. Vanished. She decided to head into the restaurant, where Xiaozhou Wen was already waiting for her. He grinned at her and waved her over to sit next to him. The guy offered her a menu, but she cut right to the chase and asked about the dude he was talking to earlier. He went dark the second she mentioned seeing them together. Seemed like he didn't want to talk about it, tried to change the subject. Hao Hao decided to cut to the chase and ask why he bailed on the Sizhui Xianxing project. He claimed he wouldn't have let them bid if he knew the owner was her classmate. His answer struck her as weird, 'cause she never singled out Shu Ruxin. The guy touched a pedal and said she was so innocent and earnest. He added that, back then, she was clueless about the intentions of people around her. Wen stated that Shu Ruxin didn't have good intentions towards her. His look changed when he started talking about his rival's feelings. Hao Hao brushed off his words, saying that he already had a crush. Wen smiled and said he was cool with her call, as long as Shu wasn't involved himself. Looks like Hao Hao still hasn't clued in to how he really feels about her. She opened the menu and said nobody gets through life without telling a few fibs. Sun Hao Hao looked at him and pointed out that he'd never lied to her. He grinned and reminded her how he promised he'd always be straight with her. Xiaozhou glanced at the woman and asked if she'd ever been dishonest with him. She froze, realizing she still hadn't told him about her previous relationship. The woman decided to bring it up later, when things calmed down, and said she hadn't. Their dinner wrapped up just as a real downpour started. Wen told her to hang tight while he grabbed a spare umbrella. Sun Hao Hao was lost in thought, gazing at the sky, when she heard a voice she didn't recognize. She spun around instantly when someone called her name. The woman clenched her fists, seeing a man heading straight for her. He introduced himself as Zhang Mingxing, said he used to work security. He said, real menacing-like, that he'd sent her a letter, but she hadn't replied. The guy mentioned listening devices and said he wanted to have a little chat. The next thing you know, Xiaozhou Wen popped up behind them. He saw the ex-employee's nasty look and whacked him with his umbrella. The guy punched him right in the jaw and demanded to know what he was up to. Looks like he wasn't about to let anyone get near the woman he loved. Sun Hao Hao couldn't believe this dude was capable of something like this. She went after Xiaozhou, trying to get him to stop. Zhang Mingxing used the chaos as cover and pulled out a knife. He told Wen to quit messing with people and went at him with the blade. Sun Hao Hao didn't even realize she'd instinctively jumped in front of the guy. Zhang Mingxing couldn't stop in time and gave her a serious wound. Her dark red blood started pooling all over the tiles by the restaurant entrance. Xiaozhou Wen felt that uncontrollable feeling rising up inside him again. He was thinking about running when he saw the blood on his hand. He heard people outside talking about the incident and couldn't believe it had happened. Zhang Mingxing froze, paralyzed by the horror of what he'd done. He stared at his hands and screamed that he never meant for this to happen. Someone yelled to call the cops and he bolted, trying to get away. He screamed he was innocent, that he just got caught in a bad situation. And just like that, a string of terrible choices cost him everything. The next morning, Sun Hao Hao woke up, not at home, but in a hospital room. Yanjun rushed to the hospital as fast as humanly possible. He practically burst into the room and saw Yongyi sitting next to her bed. Fear gripping his heart, he asked her how she was feeling. Then he saw the life support machine and her frail body lying there. He asked, his voice heavy with worry, how bad her injuries were. Thankfully, her internal organs and ligaments were okay. Just the thought of her needing 11 stitches made him wince. He felt his hands shaking and asked when she was supposed to wake up. Yongyi suggested he stay with her while she went to see the doctor. The assistant wanted to know what medications were up next. After that, she left the room, closing the door behind her. She felt like she'd just be getting in the way if she stayed in that atmosphere. She understood how important it was for him to be with Sun Hao Hao right now. The man gently stroked her hair. like he still couldn't believe what had happened. He squeezed her hand, telling her she was acting like a total damn fool, risking her life like that. Yeonjun shut his mouth when he felt her palm twitch. He was about to explode with joy when he saw her eyes flutter open. Sun Ho barely managed to open her eyes, like she couldn't believe it was actually happening. The guy pressed her hand to his chest, smiling and saying she scared the hell out of him. Hao smiled back and asked if he'd brought all her stuff back. He snapped that now wasn't the time to think about that and chewed her out for what she'd done. The guy was shaking, repeating that they'd had to stitch her up with 11 damn stitches. She replied wearily that she regretted her decision too. Big time. Hao admitted that the hit had hurt like crazy and she was terrified. She couldn't bear the thought of her gray-haired mother burying her own daughter. She smiled sadly and said there was something that scared her even more. She asked him what he'd do if his curse couldn't be lifted. His heart was about to break, knowing that even then, she was thinking about him. He didn't understand why she always thought about everyone but herself. The man bit his tongue until it hurt and told her to think about herself first for once. He was on the verge of tears, saying that moments like these scared the hell out of him. Yeonjun pulled her close and said he was terrified of losing her forever. He held her hand tight and said how freaked out he was when he heard about her injury. Song Ho never even dreamed that a man could care so much about her. He froze, surprised, when she pulled his hand away and reached for his face. She gently stroked his cheek, like she wanted to soothe his pain. With a warm smile, she pulled him close, apologizing for making him worry. He said Wenjo was a pathetic loser for letting her get hurt. She smiled and said that he was still her big brother after all. The woman didn't blame him, knowing how scared he was and how much he cried. Yeonjun tried to get her attention back, saying she almost gave him a heart attack. She laughed and asked about that agreement they'd made between them. She winced in pain, not even able to finish her sentence. Yeonjun felt fear grip him again, asking if he'd pressed on her wound. She smiled and said she was fine, and he shouldn't worry about her. He admitted he was jealous because she stuck her neck out for some other dude. Hao promised she'd do everything she could to lift the curse on him. She was surprised when he pinned her to the bed and then backed off. He touched her face and said he didn't want her risking herself for him. The guy gazed softly into her eyes and said he wasn't a pushover like Wen. Her face flushed when he promised to protect her no matter what. She laughed happily, not believing she deserved such good fortune. They froze when they overheard Yonggi and Xiaozhou talking. She tried to catch up with him, asking if he'd managed to smooth things over with the cops. He answered the assistant's question and asked how Hao was doing. Yonggi frowned when he barged into her room like that. He definitely wasn't expecting to find that jerk Yeonjun in here. The last straw was seeing him holding Sun Hao's hand. He tried to keep his cool and asked what he was doing there. Yeonjun wasn't about to answer the guy who got Hao into this mess. Yonggi tried to smooth things over, saying he was just visiting. Wen walked over to the bed and said sarcastically, "Well, look who finally made time." He called it a miracle, like he was throwing down the gauntlet. Yeonjun felt his anger starting to boil over. Little did he know, he was about to get dragged into a war for Hao's heart.